Hey everybody, this is Jill Wolf, and I'm starting just a minute or two early because I want to get this shared over to my group. So hold on 1 second while I make this thing happen. Where's me live? Here it is. Share in a group. Okay, so it's sharing, it's going, and we were almost here at 8. Well, welcome tonight to episode 6. Hi, Karen. Welcome to episode 6 of Using Play to Improve Writing, and tonight we're focusing on cooking. So I come to you from my kitchen, my quaint little live up in the mountains kitchen, and I'm actually going to be baking cookies. So I have all my bowls and my chocolate chips, and so I'm going to see what it's like to be one of those cooking shows where they actually cook while they're talking to you, and I'm going to cook while I talk to you about how we can use cooking specifically to improve writing. For those who don't know me or don't know me well, I am Jill Wolf, learning specialist, and I help homeschool parents plan meaningful experiences to awaken the learn and learning. I focus on learning, and so tonight we're going to be looking at the learning of improving writing, and we're going to use play to do that, specifically the play of cooking. Now, recently I polled a group and cooking came out one of the top. So I imagine that at least a few of you, you and your kids enjoy cooking together. And so I'm excited to come to you tonight and talk to you about how you can use that to improve writing. So I'm actually going to be making chocolate chip cookies, and this is a exciting recipe. I love this recipe. A friend of mine gave it to me, and I've tried other chocolate chip cookie recipes, but this one is awesome. So that's what I'm going to be working on as we talk tonight. Okay, so I'm not going to be charting, but I will gladly put some notes into the comment section later if there are some of you who'd like to see it written out. Just let me know. Okay, so tonight, using cooking to improve writing. So one of the first things, I actually have 6 areas that I want to talk to you tonight about using cooking to improve writing. And so the first is to make a cookbook, okay? 1 second, I'm going to grab some flour. And I know for those people who are following a much healthier diet, don't use white flour. And I am trying to wean my family off white flour, actually. But I don't yet have a great substitute for pizza dough and cookies. So if any of you have any, let me know. But anyway, okay, so cookbook. So the one thing about a cookbook is that they kind of represent the style of the cook themselves, the chef themselves. So I have a couple favorites. Let me show you. So one of my favorites is the Pioneer Woman. And I have to say her recipes are, they're not non-fat, and they're not low in sugar, and they certainly aren't super duper healthy. But she has some delicious ones, and I've been able to make some tweaks. But what's interesting about her cookbook is that it really represents her and her style. And she is on a big ranch in Oklahoma with, I think, 4 or 5 kids and her husband and all the ranchers to cook for. And so within her cookbook, she actually has, while she has pictures of the food, like as it's being made, she also has pictures of her family. And she has stories that she tells in here of her kids and of her horses and of their ranch and things that are going on. Whereas one of my other favorites is Barefoot Contessa, or Ina Garden. And if you look through her cookbook, she's a French, she's an American chef that loves the French style, that throughout her cookbook, she has ways to set up a French table or a French dinner, or how to decorate and serve. She's big on presentation. And so her book doesn't just have her book doesn't just have recipes. It has all of this other in it. So if you and your kids decide, you know what, we're going to use cooking this year and we're going to make a cookbook. It could easily become something you do all year long and that you do and decide to get it printed for Christmas. It could be a great Christmas gift. But let's talk about some of the specific writing. So some of it, I'm obviously doing more talking than baking, so maybe this is harder than it looks to do both at the same time. But a cookbook has your best recipes in it. So you guys might have 2 or 3 that you really love to make. Those will be 2 or 3. And maybe you go through and you say, you know what, we're going to do a theme. Like Ina Garden has French kind of style and flavors and things like that. My oven's preheated if I get my cookie mix made. Anyway, so your theme, it might be, maybe you want to do all baking. Or maybe you want to do it based on holidays. And so you decide I'm going to do some Valentine's Day and some Christmas and some different ones like that. Then with that, you're going to take your best recipes in your theme and you're going to make sure that they are fine-tuned the way you like them. And then you write out your recipe. And now you might be copying some of the recipe from somewhere else, and that's okay. It's, you know, it's more about the getting the recipe into the cookbook, but there's other kinds of writing. Certainly some of it is the other kind of text or style you want to put in yours. So if you want to talk about, maybe you do a theme one, and so with, or a holiday theme, and so with every holiday, you guys talk about some of your family traditions, and there's some pictures and there's some writing about it. And so you guys actually get to, so some of the writing is writing. What is our family tradition at Valentine's Day? Or what is our family tradition on July 4th? So you have that writing to put into the cookbook. So while it is about cooking, it's also about your family traditions or whatever theme you pick. So you've got that. There are also directions. So while a recipe has all of the ingredients and the directions, how specific are the directions? And do you include pictures as you go along so that whoever's making it can see what they're supposed to, what it's supposed to look like? Now, a lot of your older cookbooks, you know, 40, 50, 60, the ones our grandmas used, they never had pictures, but they had somebody teaching them regularly, okay? But cookbooks now have some photos. And so maybe you decide, we're gonna take some pictures and that's what we're gonna include in there, but we're gonna have some notes in the pictures about what it should look like or the consistency or things like that. And so that's kind of some of the writing that you can do around a cookbook. You're not doing any narrative storytelling with your cookbook. I mean, I guess you could. If you decided your theme was going to be, you had a particular story you wanted to tell, and all the food recipes in there are things that this person eats or this person bakes, or maybe the main character of your story is a chef. So there certainly is some narrative storytelling that you could do if you wanted to around a cookbook, throughout a cookbook. But for the most part, you're doing the procedural, which is the recipe, and then whatever kind of, it's called autobiographical, that you write if you're going to write anything about you or your family or your traditions and things as you go through your cookbook. All right, so that's the first one. So then the second kind I have is a cooking show, which I'm finding right now is really hard to do. And that is to actually cook at the same time that you are talking with people about something else. Now, granted, on their show, they're talking about what they're doing here, but they do go off and talk about other things at the same time. And they must be really good at this because it's not easy. But essentially a cooking show, while I have a recipe and I know what I'm going to be making, if your child decides, okay, here's the writing, I want to do a cooking show, so I have to do some writing ahead of time about what I'm going to say as I'm cooking. So am I going to be talking about how the mixture should look or how long I'm doing it? What if something has to, like pizza dough, has to knead for like 10 minutes? You know, in a real show, they might cut to a commercial, but so you have 10 minutes. What are you going to be talking about in that 10 minutes? So you can do, you write out almost like a script of what you're going to be saying and when you're going to say it. That's a different kind of writing, but it is very much associated with cooking since that's the action that you're doing in your video. Okay, that's number 2. Number 3 is a food review. Okay, let's see if my butter is softened at all. Put it on the stove. It's supposed to be like room temp. It's not. Let's see if I can get this in a little warmer. I may not get my cookie mix all made while we're talking, but that's okay. All right, food review is the third one. There are plenty of magazines and books, especially with travel, that review restaurants and review food. And doing a food review involves, can I describe the food? And do I have a sense of the food, its taste, its flavor, its feel, from the perspective of guests and people who are tasting it for the first time or the second time? So it requires some objectivity if I'm the chef. So your daughter decides, I'm going to fix this food. I want to do a food review, so I'm going to have some family friends over, or grandma and grandpa. I'm going to fix this, and then at the end of the meal, I'm going to have some interview questions to them about how the food tastes and certain things that I mixed. Could they taste this? Did it taste overly that? Or what did they like best of all of the pieces on their plate? And then I'm going to write a review of the food based on what I hear them say. Not based on what I think, based on what they think, which might be a little more difficult. So maybe siblings do it. Like, I'm going to cook, and so my sister is going to do the interview and the review, and then she's going to cook, and I'm going to do the interview and the review. But certainly writing a food review is one other way to do writing around cooking. Okay. Also, depending on how much you really want to pay attention to presentation and ambiance, that can also be part of the food review. Many reviews are about the whole food experience at a place and not just the food. So you can also include that if you want to. That doesn't have to be something you necessarily pay attention to, but if it is, then that's something that you can certainly add to your interview and add to your food review. And there are so many of these online. All you gotta do is Google food reviews, and you can read some and see the style. See, how do they talk about the food? How do they talk about the establishment? And good or bad, what is kind of the language that they're using when they're talking about food? So there's some samples. That's number 3. Okay, number 4 is a taste test. Now this one's really fun. And I'm pausing because my next step, I have to cream the butter. It's not room temp yet. So I'm just going to keep talking, and my cookies will get made when they get made. All right, so number 4, taste test. Now, I've tried this before, and it's really fun. You decide on some food that maybe you have gone like on Pinterest, or you have some different cookbooks, and you have 3 or 4 recipes for the same kind of thing. So I've done this with potato salads. I've done this with sliders. I've done this with pasta sauces. Okay, and so what I do, and it's a little bit more work at first, so you definitely need to invite some friends and family over. This is not something for just 2 or 3 people. But you make all of the recipes just as they are, and you number them, and you let people try them and tell you what they think. Which do they prefer? What do they like of this one? What do they not like of that one? And at the end, you get to take and decide, okay, so I'm going to throw that one out. No one liked it. This one, they liked A and B equally well. And I bet if I merged these 2, it would be fantastic. So you're using a taste test to come up with one recipe that you want to keep. So this is a combination of the kind of writing. First of all, you need to write up some way that these people are going to give some feedback to their preference. And it's not just which did you like the best. You're going to want to have some specific questions that you're writing for them to ask them to reflect on the food in some way, okay? And then some rating scale. And then number 2 kind of writing is you're revising the recipe. So instead of the exact recipe going into your recipe book or your favorites, you're going to take it now and tweak it based on all the feedback that you got from people during the taste test. And it's also just a lot of fun to try like 3 or 4 of the same recipes. I think the best time I did was the sliders. I think we made like 50 sliders. There are 4 different types, and so we had all these rows of them, and everybody tasted them. And 4 little sliders is a lot of food, so that was everybody's meal. But they took 1 of each, and then they let us know what they thought, and that was really fun. So taste test number 4. All right, number 5. This one's a little bit more advanced, and so you would probably be a little older before you have them write this. This is not for 5, 6, 7, 8. Maybe 9, 10, probably pushing more 10 and older, like 4th, 5th grade above. But it's called Cooking as Metaphor. So what you do is you cook something, and during the cooking process, you're to be very aware of, and this is something mom and child can help each other with, very aware of some of the challenges of fixing this particular dish or this dinner or this pastry. Is it that it was really hard or frustrating, or it didn't look the way it should, or you tried a substitution and that didn't go so well? Maybe you just omitted something altogether. You totally forgot to put it in. Or you were supposed to, whip something in your blender for 8 to 10 minutes. You only did it 2 to 3. Okay, so you're looking for something that was either challenging or some kind of tweak or error that didn't go so right. And then you want to look at the impact on the actual food itself. Did it really change the flavor? Did it change the consistency? Instead of the bread being light and fluffy, was it really dense and hard? Does it taste overly salty or under salty because of how you mixed ingredients or the mistake you made? So how does it affect the taste, the guest reaction, whoever's eating it, and even the presentation? Does it come out and it's sticky? Like, how many of you made rice and you didn't get the measurements right, or you didn't cook it long enough, so it's just this mushy glob versus this kind of light, fluffy little grains on the plate. So you're looking at both the challenge or the tweak or mistake and the impact. Then once the meal's over, you sit down, mom, child, talk together about how could that be a metaphor for something more profound, something bigger in life, something that actually has some impact. For those who are Christians and are looking into the Bible for wisdom, there are some great verses about the salt and the importance of salt in things, and too much salt versus too little salt. And they use that as a metaphor, right? And so salty foods, another metaphor out of that same, in that same direction. But there can be other ones, like I kind of whipped through everything and did it really fast. I didn't take the time to make sure I stirred this appropriately and that I whipped that long enough and that I was careful with how I put it together and put it into the pan. And so what came out wasn't great. Well, that's a great metaphor for sometimes in life we just jam through things or haul through things and forget, or intentionally we just want to finish it and it's not so great at the end. There are all sorts of ways to take some kind of mistake in the kitchen or some kind of challenge in the kitchen from cooking and consider it a metaphor for something bigger. Now, that really does take some conversation with your child, but you can discuss it that way and then have them write a piece about it. Almost like it's a journal entry or a blog or just some kind of piece that represented something that they had learned. And you're using cooking and some of the issues with cooking and the impact of choices made in the kitchen to life. Okay, the final one definitely is for someone, well, I guess it doesn't have to be somebody too much older. The text, the writing sample that you use will vary on age, but the 6th one's called Cooking as Revision. And if you know me and you know my acronym LEARN at all, R for revision is huge. I think a revision attitude about life and about everything that we're learning is very, very important. We're constantly revising how we understand things, how we make things. We revise things in the kitchen all the time, right? We revise our recipes. I know as I'm trying to cook healthier, I'm trying to, how do I remove sugar? But it still needs a sweetness. So what can I replace it with? So I'm revising how I'm cooking and the ingredients I'm using to cook. So revision is a big piece of life. So cooking as revision goes like this. I cook something and I intentionally revise or change the recipe in a way I think will improve it. Now, improve it could be improve the flavor. Like, you know what, instead of 1 clove of garlic, I'm going to add 4 because I like the flavor of garlic and I want it to have a real kind of garlicky like ding to it when they taste it. So that's how I'm going to revise the recipe. That's how I'm going to change the recipe to make the dish better. It might be substituting because I want to make it healthier. So instead of white flour, I'm going to use maybe almond flour, coconut flour. I've heard of coconut flour. I haven't tried using it. I'm not even sure I get it. But so you make some kind of substitution in the effort to make it a better dish, to improve the dish. Okay? And then you ask, does it? Did it improve the dish? Does it taste the same and now it's healthier? Or does it actually taste better because of what I put into it? Okay? And now you're going to use that same kind of thinking of I took a recipe or something that I'm cooking and I revised it to make it better. And we're going to take some piece of existing writing and we're going to do the same thing. We're going to actually tweak it, something about it, in effort to make it better. So let's start with narrative stories. I always find that the easy one. So let's say we take a picture book for really little, and we're just going to revise a page. And so maybe there's this great book called An Ant. Oh, I just got it because I'm getting ABC books for Jake. And well, I'll get the name of it, but it's all about alliteration. And so for every letter of the alphabet, it has an animal doing something, but all these like A's and then all these B's and then all these C's. Okay, so maybe I go to a page of that and I say, you know what, I want to redo the S. And instead of a snake, I want, what's another S animal? I don't know, but let's say I've just gone to the zoo and I come back and the sloth, okay? My nephew loves sloths. I think that's funny. So I've decided I'm going to revise this page, and instead of a snake, I'm going to use a sloth. So I'm going to draw my picture, and I'm going to rewrite this. Now, that would definitely be for a 5 or 6-year-old, but you're revising an existing written piece in order to make it better, to improve it, okay? If you're a little bit older, maybe it's a chapter book. Now, you're not necessarily going to rewrite a chapter. You just might rewrite the ending. Or maybe you rewrite maybe one of your favorite books like Charlotte's Web, and the spoiler alert, the spider dies, okay? And you don't like that. Maybe your child's like, I hate that Charlotte has to die. Well, how would you rewrite the ending? How would you rewrite it that is just as powerful, that is going to be consistent with the theme, that is, so now I have to do some digging. What is this book really about? And how is my changing the ending going to improve it? At least improve it for me. Maybe it doesn't improve for anybody else, but improve it for me. If you're a little older, maybe you're taking, so I always think of Star Wars. Huge Star Wars fan. I know I always reference it. But so the first 3 movies that came out in the 70s are 4, 5, 6, and then in the, I think, early 2000s came out 1, 2, 3. Well, I was very anxious. I think every Star Wars fan was very anxious to see how Anakin Skywalker goes from this, you know, young child and Jedi to Darth Vader. Like, that arc was something huge that we all wanted to see. And we were all very disappointed, right? Well, that in itself could be something that I decide I want to rewrite that. What would that look like? Now, I'm not talking rewrite the whole script. I'm not talking, rewrite a whole story about it. Maybe all you're doing is rewriting kind of the plot line, the arc that takes Anakin from good to bad. And what could have happened that would have really driven him that dark. And that's what I want to rewrite. Now, that would be somebody a little bit older. You're talking maybe 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th grade. Maybe it's just one of your favorite TV shows and you like comedy and you think you could write this scene funnier. Like, that just wasn't funny. It could be funnier. Then how would you rewrite it? Now, some of you might go to the extent to actually try to write in the format. So look up how to write a scene in a TV show, a screenplay, or you might just beat out what would you do differently, what jokes would you add, and who would you, whether you're doing physical comedy or clever or witty or sarcastic, like what would those actual jokes have said? Instead of just saying, I don't like that scene, what would you do to make it better? Okay, so that's kind of some storytelling pieces. You could also pick informational text, or as we call it in the literacy world, expository text, but informational. So maybe there's an article, like down in the Florida Keys, there is a dolphin lab. I hope it's still there. It was there 20 years ago. My sister went. And they were doing a lot of research around dolphins as let me check my butter. Boy, this is slow. It is just not getting room temperature very fast. Dolphin lab. Okay, so down in the dolphin lab, they're doing research on dolphins and using them as therapy animals to help with children who've been through trauma. So when my sister was visiting, they had a couple little girls who had been through a traumatic experience in their like 2, 3, 4 years old, and they weren't talking. Like they had just stopped talking as a result of this trauma. So they took these little girls and they had them swimming around with the dolphins. And the dolphins actually could tell when this little girl was, when it was a little girl versus an adult, and when it was someone to be really tender and gentle with, and somebody they could be a little bit faster swimming. And they were so sweet and kind. And it was amazing how these little girls came out of their shell. Now, from her experience down there, she may have then looked at, say, the website and thought, you guys really need to revise how powerful you represent what you're doing here. Especially if you're a nonprofit and you're trying to raise money, you could tell this story, or you could explain what's really going on down here much better than you do. And you could revise that. So it could be informational. Maybe I go and I visit something and then I look at its website, or I look at its pamphlet, or I look at something and I go, this isn't written well. I could rewrite this. Same is true of procedural text. Think about how many times do we get directions to, build our desk, our IKEA desk, right? And the directions are like, oh my gosh, I see English words, but none of this makes any sense. So how would you rewrite them? If you are going to write the directions to explain how to put this together, how would you do it differently? So we're essentially looking at cooking and the idea of revising a recipe and looking to see how it's improved by it. And take that experience out into, okay, so now we're going to use that and we're going to revise some piece of writing out here, whether it's a story or informational, and we're going to look at how do we make it better. Just like when we had garlic, it made that shrimp dish so much better. We're going to look at how we make this better. So you kind of use it as a jumping off point. We're not necessarily writing about cooking, although you could look at a cookbook or a recipe and say, I can write the directions better. Or, this cookbook, some of these cookbooks that have great recipes are even quite old. So how could we rewrite them so that they look more contemporary, or they look like something that, some 15 to 25-year-old girl would really want to pick up. Anyway, well, I'm getting into a lot of details, but the essence is that we use the activity of cooking and how we revise recipes in cooking to improve them, to jump into taking some piece that's already written. And it's better if it's not a piece they wrote. Something else that's already out there, a book, a story, whatever. And how would we revise a piece of that? This does a lot for their gives a little jolt to creativity and imagination. It also has them dive into what's the intent of the author. Author's purpose and intent is a huge part of understanding, of reading and writing. And so understanding what was that author trying to do here, because I want to stay in the vein of that. I want to stay in the direction they're going, but this part just needs to be fixed or revised. I'm going to revise it. It needs some changing. So that's a lot of deeper thinking. All right. So I'm going to recap here. Let me double check I got everything. Yes. So cooking can be a great way to actually do some writing about the cooking experience, writing about the food experience, recording what we are doing through a cooking show or writing out our recipes. Or it also could be a jumping off point for things that are a little bit more difficult to get our hands around, like metaphor and revision. Because cooking's very concrete and physical. Like this stuff is right here. And when I made these cookies, they just did not taste right. So where in here was my mistake? And how is that like, and then extrapolate that out to a metaphor situation. Those cooking can be used for some of that like tougher stuff in writing. But depending on the age of your kids and depending on where you want to go with it, there's a whole lot of options. So I hope I've given you some great ideas, and I hope that you'll come on here and share in the comment section what you're trying, questions that you have, and any other things that you'd like to share about using cooking to improve writing. And I'm excited to see you guys next week. And yeah, a whole lot of ands. Not good writing, but exciting things going on. So have a great Thursday night or Friday if you're watching the replay, and a wonderful weekend. See you later.